I did a lot of news segments this past week, and everybody asked me about the hostage deal. You know, what do you think about the hostage deal? And I found myself saying something that I found self-contradictory. You know, even as the words were coming out of my mouth, I try to be a reasonably intelligent person. Even as the words are coming out of my mouth, I recognized that they didn't make any sense. I said I supported the deal, and I also said that I hated the deal. I supported it primarily because I thought it might lead to the end of a nightmare for at least some of the poor hostages and their families going through unimaginable torment, torture, and hell. So, of course, that was the most important thing. We hopefully would free some hostages. I also supported it because it had the backing of the Prime Minister of Israel, the Shabak, the Mossad, the IDF, and 70% of the Israeli population. So what do I know compared to them? And I also supported it because, being an observant Jew, I understood that the freeing of hostages is one of the great commandments in the Bible, one of the great mitzvot. It's called a mitzvah rabbah, a great commandment. And it's even more important than feeding the poor and healing the sick. But I hated it. I hated it, for the obvious reason. On just the very first day, in exchange for 3 female victims of Hamas terror, we were going to free 90 terrorists. 90 terrorists in exchange for 3 victims of terror. BBC will say, it's an exchange of war prisoners. No, it's not. It's not an exchange of war prisoners. It's an exchange of 3 victims, nothing to do with war, nothing to do with battle, nothing to do with fighting, in exchange for 90 people that tried to kill Jews, or in fact, in some cases, did kill Jews. And as further hostage releases hopefully continue, the quantum and the horrific nature of the terrorists to be freed grows at an even greater differential. So this is a hateable deal, but it's a deal that I supported. And this wasn't the hypothetical numbers game for me either. I'll tell you, personally, the murderer of one of my friends, the murderer of Ari Fold, a friend of mine for years, he's scheduled to be released as part of this deal. So, it really hits home. And I took a lot of flack from my conservative friends with whom I usually agree for supporting this deal. My argument in favor of the deal, as I'll explain in a second, is that this deal reflects the essential character of the State of Israel. Now, the argument by those in favor of the deal usually begins with the point, you'd support this deal if one of your children was in captivity. And of course that's true. Of course that's true. And the response invariably is, but the government of Israel must decide what's best for all, not an individual captive, no matter how painful the decision. And of course that's true. And both sides, I would say respectfully to all of them, and everybody means well and everybody is suffering, both sides are missing the point. The point is that in Israel, likely only in Israel, the hostages held in captivity are everyone's children. Everyone's children. Israel is one family. Religious, secular, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Ethiopian, immigrants from Europe, Ukrainian, whoever they are, one family. One large family feeling enormous pain at the suffering of their children. In other words, the argument isn't if this was your child, you would support the deal. The argument is this is your child. This is everyone's child, and we must save our children. Now, that's not the end of the discussion. Some respond to that argument and they'll say, well, look, If Israeli society will release thousands of brutal, murderous criminals to gain the return of just a few hostages, and these criminals that are going to be released are likely to return to their malign activity. Everyone agrees with that. I agree with that. These are terrible people likely to try again. If that's what Israel does, to give away murderous criminals in exchange for a few human lives, well, then Israel just has no chance. It is too soft to win this war against terror and evil. And I say just the opposite. I say this doesn't make Israel soft. It doesn't make Israel weak. It doesn't diminish Israel's prospects for victory. When Israel places this extraordinary value and priority on every Israeli life, it unifies and strengthens its society in a way that vastly exceeds the cost of freeing some terrorists who hopefully will be recaptured, maybe even killed, in due course and prevented from any further atrocities. This is Israel's secret weapon. Its commitment to save the lives of every single citizen. Israel's national unity, strained almost to the brink by the first half of 2023, leading undoubtedly in part to the intelligence failures that caused the worst attack since the Holocaust on October 7th of 2023. Israel's unity is essential to Israel's survival. And let's face it. With all these competing views on the hostage deal, when those three young women hugged their mothers after 471 days in hell, there wasn't a dry eye in the Jewish world. We were all together and felt as if our own child had been brought home. We are a people who like to argue. We like to debate. We like to even find fault with each other sometimes. Moses criticized the Jewish nation for these faults some 3,500 years ago. We haven't gotten the memo. Our challenges remain. We're the same people. But with all our differences, we must maintain the essential unity and commitment to our core common values that has preserved the Jewish nation for longer than any other people on earth. I want to put this within a historical context. I want to tell you just how lucky we are to be alive today, and how we must cherish and protect our beloved state of Israel. Beginning with Abraham's call to faith some 4,000 years ago, the Jewish people have only ruled over the entirety of the land of Israel from a capital in Jerusalem for a very, very, very brief time. King David and King Solomon, that was 73 years, 33 years for King David, 40 for King Solomon. The Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, we can debate that. A maximum of 100 years, I would argue, quite less, doesn't really matter much. And of course, modern Israel, now for almost 77 years. That's it, 4,000 years we have been a people. 4,000 years we've been a people. In our storied history, it is the rare exception that we have been a united people, a united nation with a capital in Jerusalem. Less than 250 years out of our 4,000-year-old history. That's less than 6%. Less than 6% of the history, time-wise, of the Jewish people have we been a nation with sovereignty over the land of Israel, ruling it from a capital in Jerusalem. From the Assyrians to the Babylonians to the Romans to the Crusaders to the Muslims, the Jewish nation has suffered through conquest after conquest, remaining a people in our holy land, but rarely with autonomy, rarely with dignity, until these past 77 years. How fortunate we are to be alive at this moment in history. You know, my grandparents, they should rest in peace. If I would have told them, there'll come a day when you can wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to go to Israel this week. You call you travel agent, you go online, you get a ticket, 3 hours later you're on a plane, you're in Israel 10 hours later. They wouldn't believe it. They would think this is a fantasy beyond anybody's reasonable imagination. How could that be? Israel? We've been praying for 2,000 years to be restored to the land of Israel, to be restored to Jerusalem. We say it, V'techazenu einenu b'shuvcha l'Tzion b'rachamim. We pray for the day when our eyes will see our return to Zion. That's what we've been doing for 2,000 years. We can actually do it. It's unbelievable. This is this unique time in our history, 77 years, that's it, that we can go and we could be in Israel whenever we want. But we have to be together. We can't lose this. We can never lose this. We've seen what happens in the past. We've seen what a lack of unity does. I'll give you one example. King Solomon, right? King Solomon was reported to be the wisest man on earth. I tend not to agree because they said he had 1,000 wives. There's nobody can be that smart if they had 1,000 wives. That suggests to me maybe he's not as smart as he thinks he is. But he was reported to be the wisest man on earth, and he couldn't hold his kingdom together. He builds the temple. He builds the temple, the great temple, the first temple, much more ornate and elaborate than the second. Builds the temple, and he opens up the temple, and he lost his people. 10 of the 12 tribes, after Solomon died, 10 of the 12 tribes peeled off to form their own kingdom of Israel, leaving Solomon's progeny to rule over the much smaller kingdom of Judea. What happened from that loss of unity, that split? We lost all 10 tribes. You've heard of the lost tribes. That's what happened. They were lost. They formed a kingdom for a couple hundred years. The Assyrians came in, conquered them, and sent them off to the nether reaches of their kingdom. 10 tribes gone forever. 5/6 of the Jewish community gone forever because King Solomon, with all his wisdom, could not keep the nation of Israel unified. In a sense, in a certain sense, I wish that we weren't called Jews. Being called Jews is essentially a recognition of our failure, because I wish we were called Israelites. I wish we were all, had 12 tribes and we were all part of the Israelite nation. We're called Jews because we're all descendants from the stub of the Jewish nation, from Judea. That's why we're called Jews. It's sort of an acknowledgement every day, if you think about it, as to how dangerous it is for us not to be unified as a people. Why am I telling you all these things? Why, at this dinner, am I offering this explanation as to why I support the hostage deal? Why the observation that every Israeli sees the poor hostages as a son or a daughter or another relative? Why the history lesson about disunity, how it can destroy the Jewish nation? Why the discussion about how unique and special it is to be alive today and to be a Zionist today? The answer is because all these things, our unity, our deep love and concern for one another, our ability to coexist and flourish as a nation despite our very real differences, our unprecedented achievements as a people, they all derive from a single institution, perhaps the holiest institution ever to represent the Jewish people, the Israel Defense Forces. The IDF. It is a crucible into which Israelis enter from different cultures, socioeconomic backgrounds, levels of faith, and political views, and they are forged into a single defense force driven by love of country, patriotism, loyalty to each other, commitment to a joint mission, and an understanding of their place and role in Jewish history. I'm sure many of you have been to an induction ceremony of the IDF. I'm sure you know where they held the ceremony. Not at the Knesset, not at Yad Vashem, not at the President's house. The induction ceremony for new soldiers occurs at the Western Wall, occurs at the Kotel, so that every soldier understands where he or she stands in the continuum of Jewish history and what they are fighting for. They are literally fighting for the continuation, the survival, the advancement of our Jewish nation. Only the IDF, no one else. The IDF is an institution that is held sacred by just about every Israeli. As I said, I refer to it as a holy institution. It is holy in every sense of the word. And it is a source of great pride for a great nation and a platform for the creativity, the innovation, the economic growth, and the moral courage that makes Israel the great nation that it is today. Throughout our long, sometimes illustrious, and always challenged history, not until 1948 have we had a bedrock institution like the IDF. To me, the IDF, together with God's grace, are the two reasons why I have such optimism about our collective future. And that, my friends, is why I am so thrilled to support the Friends of the IDF, the central organization through which the IDF is able to request what is needed but not budgeted to support its brave soldiers. Israel is currently engaged in the longest war in its history. Every one of its 600,000 plus soldiers has been called to serve. Three-quarters of its soldiers are reservists. I don't know if you remember what it was like to be a reservist in the old days when things, in times of peace, you know, these were guys who would serve together for 20, 30 years. They'd get called up for 3 weeks. They'd show up. They'd pitch a tent. Some guy would bring a deck of cards. Another guy would bring a hibachi. They'd get together, talk about their families, and go home. That was the life of a reservist until October 7th. October 7th, the reservists showed up, 450,000 of them. They lost their businesses. Many of them were away from their wives and children for months and months on end, 5 months, 6 months. Some didn't come home. Some never saw their children again. And they did this just to defend all of us and to defend their beloved Jewish state. This ongoing war has been enormously painful to Israel's brave soldiers. As I said, some have lost their lives, some have lost limbs, and some have been traumatized in ways that we can only imagine. We don't know how long it's going to take for them to heal. This isn't over the day, if there's ever a ceasefire. I frankly hope that the day of the ceasefire is the day that every single Hamas terrorist perishes from the face of the earth. That's the day we need to have a ceasefire. But we don't know the day after when they come home, you know, the videos, and, you know, we're so proud of them and we know that how great they are and how loyal they are and how much we owe them. But then they got to go home and they got to go from 6 months of, you know, not taking a shower and not getting any sleep and killing people and seeing blood and seeing their friends lose their lives. They got to come home now. They got to be husbands all over again. They got to be fathers all over again. We don't see any of that, and we don't need to see. I don't want to see any of that. But these are real issues. These are real issues that we have to deal with, and that's what the FIDF is doing right now. Such holy work, responding to the needs of the IDF. As you saw, $100 million being earmarked for PTSD trauma centers for soldiers who are really in need of healing their mental health. Or $27 million for bereaved families, $3 million for blood plasma, off-road ambulances and field hospitals, whatever you could imagine was needed to help these soldiers. Anything short of bullets and missiles, right? Whatever they needed, whatever was not in the military budget, because this war was not anticipated, whatever it was, the call comes from the IDF to the FIDF. This is what we need, and it's there. It's there. It's the most significant since this war. I have no problem saying it is the single most important Jewish philanthropy in the world, without question. So in simple terms, the FIDF acts to strengthen, again, the single most important institution in our Jewish existence, the Israeli Defense Forces. It's through that unqualified and unlimited support that Israel today is, I believe, with all of the trauma, with the loss, with the heartache, with the hostages, with all of that, Israel today, I have no doubt, is stronger than at any time in its history, stronger than at any time in its history. It is in the process of mopping up Hamas. It's going to defeat Hamas. And if you talk to anybody in government and they say, no, we're going to slow it down and have a ceasefire, we're going to make peace, we're going to just look them in the eye and say, no, we've done that before. We've seen that movie. Never again will Hamas rule the Gaza Strip. Never again will that happen. And tell that to every person that you can speak to. I happen to know a few of the decision makers myself, and I can assure you that's what I'm saying every day. Okay, no ceasefire. We have our foots on their throat. We have leverage over Hamas, over Hezbollah, over Iran. Let us exercise that leverage and end this conflict once and for all and bring peace to this area. We must do it. Now is the time. And I'll tell you, Israel has, in addition to defeating Hamas, they've decapitated Hezbollah. They have sanitized Syria. They have humiliated Iran. Okay, Israel, as I said, stronger than ever before, all because of these brave, incredible soldiers who risked their lives, all for us. And that is why I am so proud to speak to you tonight and so grateful for your support. I am blown away by the outpouring of funds, and every dollar that you donated tonight is going to a holy cause. Thank you. May God bless you. May God bless the state of Israel, its citizens and its soldiers, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you so much.